Hi, it's Mrs. Clark. Welcome to our video lessons for the Fertile Crescent, which is one of the cultures you could choose for the Ancient and World Cultures part of quarter one. Before you get started on this video, make sure that you've opened your hyperdoc and you've completed at least the pre-assessment portion of your hyperdoc before you continue with the video. So throughout this lesson, we are going to take a quick overview about the Fertile Crescent geography, changes for early people in Mesopotamia, Mesopotamian contributions, and Judaism. As we go through each of these videos pertaining to the Fertile Crescent, I want you to keep in mind the 8 essential questions and posters that we've looked in previous lessons. Each of these posters is going to be connected to the Fertile Crescent and how they make connections to our world. There's also these 4 highlighted words that you need to remember and think about as we go through each of these ancient cultures. Culture, the way of life of a people. Civilization, which is the complex way of life which contains organized political, economic, and social institutions. And remember that multiple cultures can make up one civilization. Interdependence, which is when countries or cultures are mutually dependent upon one another. And interrelationship, which is a relationship showing how things have an effect on each other. So if you're ready and focused, let's get started. Let's first look at the Fertile Crescent geography. So Mesopotamia is known as the Fertile Crescent. Both of those names are interchangeable, and you will hear me use one or the other when referring to this area that we are talking about. It is the area of land that stretched from the Mediterranean Sea between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers all the way to the Persian Gulf. And you can see here on this map that I've included, it's that green area that's highlighted. It's in a crescent shape if you think of a crescent moon, which is how it got its name. And the land here, as we will discover, was very fertile and prime for growing crops, which is how it got its name, Fertile Crescent. I also included in those red circles the major rivers and seas that are important to the Fertile Crescent geography. We have the Mediterranean Sea on the left, the Persian Gulf on the right, and the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which are on the top and the bottom of our Fertile Crescent or Mesopotamian area. Now here's a world map of what you would see for today, and I included this red portion here in the middle. That is where Mesopotamia or the Fertile Crescent was located in ancient times, and I circled it so you can see where it's located on a world map. Remember, we live in North America over on the left, and the Fertile Crescent. I need to just start up. This is the problem. Hi, it's Mrs. Clark. Welcome to your video lessons on the Fertile Crescent, which is one culture that you could choose as part of our Ancient and World Cultures unit for quarter one. Within this video, we're going to take a quick overview on the Fertile Crescent geography, changes for early peoples in Mesopotamia, Mesopotamian contributions, and Judaism. Things that you should know as we go through these videos. I want you to keep those 8 essential questions and posters in the back of your mind. We're going to be talking about how each of those posters pertains to each of the cultures that we go through and their impact on the world. I want you to also keep in mind these 4 highlighted vocabulary words: culture, civilization, interdependence, and interrelationship. Culture is the way of life of a people, and a civilization includes the culture and the organized political, economic, and social institutions. Multiple cultures can be found inside one civilization. Interdependence is how countries or cultures are mutually dependent upon one another, and interrelationship is the relationship that shows how things have an effect on one another. So these are very important to keep in mind as we go through each of these cultures. So let's start with the Fertile Crescent geography. Mesopotamia is also known as the Fertile Crescent. You will hear me use both of those words to identify this area interchangeably. They are the same area, so when you hear Mesopotamia or Fertile Crescent, know that I'm talking about the same place. Mesopotamia, known as the Fertile Crescent, is the land that stretched from the Mediterranean Sea between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers all the way to the Persian Gulf. It is that green highlighted area over there on the map. And you can see that I indicated those major bodies of water in red circles or ovals, the Mediterranean Sea on the left, Persian Gulf on the right, the Tigris and Euphrates in that green shaded area. So the green shaded area, if you notice, kind of looks like a crescent moon. It has that arch to it, which is how the area got its name, Fertile Crescent. The area was very prime for growing crops. It was a fertile area of land, and it has a sort of crescent shape. So here's a world map showing where Mesopotamia or the Fertile Crescent is located in the world. We live on North America, and you can see that Mesopotamia, Fertile Crescent, is located over on the other side of the world across the Atlantic Ocean from us. Here's a zoomed in picture, Fertile Crescent again in the orange, and I just noted a couple other civilizations that we will get a chance to learn about this year. Rome over on the left, the boot-shaped area, and then India over on the right, that V-shaped peninsula. And if you're curious as to where Mesopotamia is located in today's world, with today's countries as they stand, you can see it in that light shaded area over on this new map. Mesopotamia currently makes up a couple different countries, current day Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Kuwait. So if you've ever traveled to any of those countries, you have been on the land that was once the beginning of civilization in Mesopotamia or the Fertile Crescent. So the Fertile Crescent geography is further this plain, P-L-A-I-N, not airplane. It's the flat area between the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, and it was this fertile land that was ideal for growing crops because of the predictable flooding of these rivers. So what's essential to life is food, and this area was a great place to grow crops because of the rivers and bodies of water that surrounded it. Farmers also built irrigation systems to control the watering of these crops. They were able to save time and energy and effort by not having to walk back and forth from bodies of water with buckets to carry water to their crops. They created this sort of system that brought the water to them. So there are the posters that we talked about in the beginning. Let's focus on the geography poster for this section. How does the geography influence a culture's trade and communication with other cultures? So what is important about the geography of the Fertile Crescent? So we talked about how the location between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers created this fertile land and produced many crops. A large population of people was able to live off the crops in this area, and they were able to settle and live there. And because only a few farmers were needed, they created this sort of division of labor, which means that not everybody in this culture or civilization needed to be a farmer. They could task out jobs to other people to do other types of jobs that were needed in this civilization. So the reason the first civilization developed in this region was because of the fertile land, their crop surplus, which means they had more than enough food that was needed. They created this irrigation system. A large population of people was able to settle here, and they were able to divide out the labor so people could have different jobs. Not everyone had to focus on the food. People could focus on other aspects to create their civilization and to keep it going. All right, so our next lesson is going to focus on another aspect of the Fertile Crescent. So if you need to pause the video here to go and work on your hyperdoc, I invite you to do that, or you can keep going if you're ready to go on to the next section. So our next section is going to talk about the changes for early people in Mesopotamia. In the beginning of life, people were nomadic hunters and gatherers, meaning they had to travel from place to place following their food. Wherever their food went, they went as well. If all of the berries and food resources in their area were gone or used up, they moved their family to another place where there was more food. Many settlers moved to Mesopotamia because of its fertile farming land, which led to the growth and development of city-states. So these people didn't have to keep moving for their food anymore. They could settle in this one area and grow their crops instead of having to continue moving with their food. And they created these city-states, which is a city that is an individual unit with its own form of government and traditions. And lots of these city-states would pop up in this area. Farming in this region was so successful because the Mesopotamians developed an irrigation system to control the Tigris and Euphrates flooding and even provide water to crops in times of drought. And this was talked about in our previous section on the geography of Mesopotamia. This irrigation system was so crucial to this civilization in this area. They didn't have to walk back and forth with buckets of water. They created these channels dug into the ground. So when the Euphrates and Tigris rivers flooded, the water would go through these channels and provide water to their crops. And they could save this water and use this irrigation system even when they weren't getting rain water through the sky. A surplus of crops in this area made it unnecessary for everyone to become a farmer. It made it possible for other people to have different professions. Everyone could have a specialized job. Not everyone had to focus on the food in this civilization. Farmers in this area in Mesopotamia primarily grew barley, wheat, onion, grapes, turnips, apples, and eggplant. The popularity of this region led to the development of many empires. Lots of people took notice of this area and started to settle here, and they created these empires, which were large territories consisting of many different places under the rule of a single person. So think of it as the United States with all of our different states in our one country and one person or one system of people ruling over or providing guidance to these people. And you can see over here in this chart, the major civilizations in Mesopotamia that would pop up over time would be these 5 empires, and we will learn a little bit about some of them throughout our time in this unit. So our poster change over time, poster number 1. How has this culture developed over time? How did Mesopotamia change over time? So if you remember in the beginning, the people of this region were originally nomadic, meaning they traveled after their food in search of plants and animals to feed themselves. After they learned how to domesticate animals and settle into farms, they grew into city-states and empires emerged. People stopped moving around and settled in places, and so these civilizations were able to develop into city-states and empires with a government. So you can see on this simple timeline, people started as hunters and gatherers, and then they learned how to farm. They developed and lived in one area, making these city-states, and a bunch of these city-states came together to create an empire, which was ruled over by one set of people. All right, so that's it on this section. If you need to stop the video and work on your hyperdoc for this section, I invite you to do that. If you're ready, we can continue the video into our next section of Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. We're now going to focus our attention on some Mesopotamian contributions. Some Mesopotamian contributions lasted well after the civilization died out, including the ones you see here on the screen. Many of these contributions we still use in our lives today. So cuneiform writing was one contribution that the Mesopotamians had. The written laws or the Code of Hammurabi, the wheel, the calendar, the 60-second minute, the arch, and the use of place value in mathematics. And we're going to look at each of these individually. So let's start with cuneiform. Cuneiform was one of the earliest systems of writing invented by the Sumerians in ancient Mesopotamia. It's distinguished by its wedge-shaped marks on clay tablets that were made from blunt reeds, using them as a stylus or a sort of pen or pencil. On the screen, you can see how the letters matched up to our alphabetic system and how the people in Mesopotamia used this early system of writing to communicate and write down stories with one another. Another contribution was the Code of Hammurabi, which was a collection of 282 rules. They established standards, set fines and punishments to meet the requirements of justice. Hammurabi's code was carved into a massive finger-shaped black stone pillar. So these rules and codes were used to kind of keep order and hold people accountable for their actions in the time of Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. Another contribution was the wheel. Think about how many ways we use the wheel still today. This ancient Mesopotamian contribution was brought about in about 3000 3500 BC, and they used the potter's wheel to throw pots or create clay pots, and wheels on carts to transport both people and goods. Think about how many different ways we still use the wheel in our world today. And this wheel was invented by the Mesopotamians in 3500 BC, very long time ago. Another contribution from the Mesopotamians was the calendar. The Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians used a lunar calendar with a year made up of the 12 lunar months. The most lasting definitions of the term year, month, and day came from the Mesopotamians. Now, our calendar looks slightly different than it did then as it does today, but the words year, month, and day and the concepts of those units of time in a calendar were created and come up with by the Mesopotamians. Another contribution the Mesopotamians have on our life today was the development of time concept, which was dividing time units into 60 parts, which eventually led to the 60-second minute and 60-minute hours, which is what we use today to help us tell time. The Mesopotamian arch created by the Sumerians were inverted U or V-shaped structures built above doorways. To build the arches, the Sumerians stacked bricks made of clay and straw so they rose in steps from walls until they met into the center. And as we continue to look at other ancient cultures, you will notice that some other cultures use archways a lot in their architecture as well. The Sumerians and Babylonian people used mathematics, and they created a base 60 numeric system. The Babylonian numbers use a true place value system where digits were written in the left column represented larger values, much as we use the decimal system today. Although, of course, today we use a base 10 system as opposed to a base 60 system. But the foundation and the principles of this mathematic system they used are very similar to what we use today in math. So here are some posters that are going to help us think further about Mesopotamia and their contributions. So poster 4 is the poster on leadership. How are the leaders of yesterday and today the same? How are they different? What are the characteristics of leaders and what effects do leaders have on others? So we talked about Hammurabi. He was the 6th king of Babylon, and he was the first to codify a strict set of laws and punishment that he used to unite a large group of people under his rule and establish his empire as a powerful force in the ancient world. So without order, there is chaos, and Hammurabi was able to create these laws and rules to help keep the people held accountable for their actions and when needed to punish people that didn't obey the laws. And he was able to unite people under these laws and establish his empire as a powerful force. As a leader, he set the precedent for uniting different people under a single rule, and many under his leadership traits can be seen in more modern leaders. Think about other leaders today, as we will look at some other leaders in other ancient cultures we study, that were able to unite their people under a single rule and lead them. Poster 6 has to do with government. Why do cultures create a government? How are governments different? How are they the same? Mesopotamia was a very tumultuous area made up of smaller kingdoms, and the people needed a strong government and leaders that would unite them into a powerful empire for protection. So without a uniting government, all the different civilizations, all the different cultures were kind of working on their own, and they were in smaller kingdoms. They needed a strong government that would unite them or bring them together under a common goal, and leaders that would lead them so that they could work together primarily to gain power in their area and to protect themselves. The uncertainty of life in this region led the people to follow the strong leaders or a theocracy of powerful priests. They needed someone to look to provide them with guidance, and the government in this area was able to do that for them. Poster 8 deals with science and technology. How have math and science discoveries affected our life? We talked a lot about the contributions from Mesopotamia. They had some amazing accomplishments, including the wheel and the numerical system that we use today in our life in the United States. So that concludes this section of our lesson on Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. I invite you to pause the video, go back to your hyperdoc, and complete this section in your hyperdoc before you move forward to our last section. Judaism is the religion that popped up in this area, and we're going to learn a little bit about it in this lesson. So the group of people known as the Hebrews settled between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River Valley. They were a nomadic people who moved throughout the Fertile Crescent and settled in this area. An influential person in this time, Abraham, he was considered today to be the father of the Jewish people. He was told by God to settle his people in Canaan according to the Hebrew Bible. This area that they settled in later became known as Israel, as we know it today. And once they settled in this area of Israel, the Hebrews became known as the Israelites. Like many early peoples, the Mesopotamians believed in many gods. What set them apart is in Judaism and Abraham, they only believed in one God. So after Assyria, which was another empire in this area, conquered the northern part of Israel, as you can see in the red circle there on the map, the people of the southern part, Judea, became known as Jews. The religion of the Jews, or Judaism, was one of the world's first monotheistic religions. Monotheistic is defined as the belief in one God. So while many Mesopotamians in this area believed in multiple gods, and you will see in other religions and cultures that we study their belief in many gods, the Jews only believed in one God, which is referred to as a monotheistic religion. The important text of the Jews in Judaism is called the Torah, and it contained the 10 Commandments, which set about their structure and rules as to what they believed in and how they behaved as Jewish people. Before Judaism, as I alluded to earlier, most religions were based on the belief of many gods, and these types of religions that believe in more than one God are known as polytheistic or polytheism, meaning more than one God. So our poster changed over time. How has the culture changed over time? Let's look at it now within the lens of Judaism. Before the development of Judaism, most cultures believed in polytheistic religions. They believed in multiple gods and worshipped several of them. But as time moved on and things changed, when Judaism came about, there was this shift in religion only believing in one God, or a monotheistic religion. They believed in one God. So we have a change from a polytheistic to a monotheistic religion, believing in many gods down to believing into one God. So that concludes our lessons on Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. Make sure you return to your hyperdoc and you finished it, and you take your unit assessment showing me everything you learned about Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. Feel free to go back and rewatch any of the lessons as needed to help you practice and study your knowledge of Mesopotamia and Fertile Crescent. I hope you enjoyed your lessons, and I'll see you all in the next video.